I feel like I watched a different speech than the rest of you guys. I was appalled. There was such a profound, bold-faced lie in that speech. The idea that we planned for every contingency. I have been personally trying to tell this administration since it took office. I've been trying to tell our government for years that this was coming.
And he goes on, and again on MSNBC, some fiery comments about President Biden's remarks on Afghanistan from veteran Matt Zeller.
Yeah, joining us now to discuss this is our panel. Rick Green, attorney and former Texas state legislator and founder of PatriotAcademy.com. David Grasso, anchor of Bold TV. And AJ Swinson, chief of staff, New Journey PAC. Good to see everybody here, and thank you so much for coming on. AJ, I'll start with you. What do you make of mainstream media's glowing coverage there? Brian Williams there saying what he said about the president's speech, and then Zeller's comments completely being parallel to what was said by the anchor on MSNBC.
Well, it was repugnant and it was disgusting. I don't care who the president is, whether this was Trump or whoever. This was a failure and it looked bad on us. If you look at the headlines, Foreign Policy magazine is saying how the Afghan tribes beat the United States. Hamas, the terror organization, is saying that the Taliban has now shown oppressed people that they can beat the United States. This is a huge failure. And for Joe Biden to blame it on the Afghanistani people, to blame it on everything but the fact that he had a plan is completely why he should not be president right now. You're not ready for this level if you cannot take responsibility fully and fix your problems. And that's the issue that we're seeing here.
I want to play sound from another program on MSNBC. This is host Nicole Wallace suggesting a vast majority of Americans agree with what Biden had to say yesterday. Listen to this.
95% of the American people will agree with everything he just said. 95% of the press covering this White House will disagree. And for an American president to finally be completely aligned with such an overwhelming majority of what the American people think about Afghanistan is probably a tremendous relief to the American people.
Rick Green, I'd like to get your reaction to the comments she said, because it is accurate in that probably a good amount of Americans want to leave Afghanistan. But the question really was how it happened and what we saw unfold on television, and the fact that President Biden really failed to address that during his speech yesterday.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, Wallace's argument is a straw man argument. This was not about whether or not to leave, and that's what he focused on entirely. It was about how we decided to leave. I mean, I always look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is apparently silver alerts work at Camp David because they finally found the guy wandering around whatever trail he was lost at and got him to come give a speech. So at least we got that far. The bad is that, look, this president refused to even take questions at a moment when America is looking so weak and needed to reverse that and project some kind of competence or strength. And then the ugly, I mean, look, this is definitely the most incompetent president and vice president, perhaps in American history. And they left thousands of Americans and American allies stranded because they just set a date and hoped that everything would work out. At least Trump had a plan for certain things had to happen before the final withdrawal. Agreed. Most Americans wanted us to get the heck out of there. But look, Democrats have been horrible at foreign policy for about a half a century now. Definitely this administration is taking that to a whole nother level. And I just want to defend Jimmy Carter for a minute. He used to be the worst, but it is not even fair now to compare Joe Biden to Jimmy Carter. That's how bad this administration is.
Continuing covering the media coverage, we'll show you CNN, Jake Tapper expressing a more even-keeled stance on Biden's speech. Here's that.
The president said that the buck stopped with him, but in fact, the speech was full of finger-pointing and blame, especially for the Afghans, even saying that while the U.S. would be working to rescue those Americans and U.S. allies who needed to be saved, he did not really get into or accept any blame for the catastrophic exit that we have been watching on television in the last several days.
David Grasso, covering television is something that you would have said you almost knew how this was going to be handled coming out of the gate. It would have been a little bit of finger pointing and maybe ignoring the actual crisis that's happening, which is the actual withdrawal. But how do you feel? Was Jake Tapper spot on with that analysis of Biden's speech?
I think Jake is spot on because no one envisioned this happening as fast as it did. And there's no way to explain the horrific events that we saw over the weekend. And really, no one ever expected Kabul to be taken over in a matter of hours. And our enemies are watching across the world and they're laughing at us. This shows us that no amount of money that we put into Afghanistan could solve the problem. And I think that it's very sad the way things turned out. And I'm glad to hear Jake Tapper calling out power for what it is.
We did not see the president take any questions yesterday as he left the White House and is now returned at Camp David. Jen Psaki will take questions, or at least will hold a press briefing today at 1:30 p.m. So we'll be watching for that. Rick Green, David Grasso, AJ Swinson, please stick around. Another topic to get to.
Yeah, the investigation into Andrew